bulk of the current attendees on the webinar, so we will begin. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining the first Energy Symposium, UT Energy Symposium, sponsored by the Energy Institute for the fall 2020 semester. I'm Kerry King from the Energy Institute. I'm a research scientist and assistant director. And now I'm going to introduce our two speakers today. So today our two speakers are Bill Hicks and Seng Cheah from ExxonMobil. They're going to give us a talk on digitalization and revolutionizing equipment fleet management. So thinking about the set of equipment at their facilities. The background for each of them. So Bill Hicks, a graduate of Texas A&M and has been working in the oil and gas industry for 30 years in process engineering, coordination and economics, and modeling. His current position is global technology sponsor within ExxonMobil Research Engineering. And he identifies their opportunities across their facilities around the globe to maximize energy efficiency. I think we'll hear some of this today. Seng is a graduate of the National University of Singapore and has 12 years of experience in the petrochemical industry. At his time at ExxonMobil, he's involved in process engineering and distillation and energy, as well as process design. And he's been heavily involved in process optimization and development of energy products, or energy projects. He is serving as energy specialist for North America. So I will now turn off my screen and hand it over to our guests so that they can share with us their knowledge. For those of you attending, again, please submit questions via the Q&A feature on the webinar. And after the presentation is done, we will field these questions. We will ask these questions for you or potentially allow you to speak and ask the questions verbally. So thank you very much for joining. And Seng, feel free to share your screen and go ahead.
Yep, thank you. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
It looks good.
You're good.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. I'm Seng, energy specialist at ExxonMobil. With me, I have Bill Hicks, and today we'll be discussing the digitalization initiative within our company and share how we are integrating digital technology with our fleet management system. Okay. Just a quick disclaimer. This slide really covers a liability disclaimer, and it's really, and in essence, right, content shown in this package should not be reused unless with written consent from ExxonMobil. Okay. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the contributions of the entire international team, whose inputs were vital in successfully developing this tool. Okay, why the focus on fleet management systems? The ExxonMobil 2018 Energy Outlook indicates that energy demand will more than double by 2040, as shown by the black line. But with improvements in energy efficiency, this increase can be drastically reduced. This emphasizes the importance and the urgency for improving energy efficiency. Fleet management systems help us to identify such opportunities. ExxonMobil has a strong commitment towards improving energy efficiency. We are the most energy efficient refining company, and we have achieved a 10% improvement via the Global Energy Management System launched in 2000. We are now implementing new data science and open process automation technologies to help us improve even further. ExxonMobil is seeking a fundamental transformative solution for our process automation needs. Under the Open Automation Initiative, there will be easier access to data. This will increase the productivity of our engineers, enabling them to manage large fleets of equipment This fundamental change will help minimize information silos by making sure that everyone has access to this data, as well as increase transparency within the organization. As such, we'll be able to unlock many previously difficult to identify opportunities and take the required actions to capture them. This would help improve energy efficiency performance across our entire fleet. At ExxonMobil, energy efficiency, it's about energy optimization rather than energy minimization. This view is aligned with our overall business objectives to competitively satisfy the growing global energy demand. So far, I have discussed the importance of energy efficiency for fleet management. It is one of the keys to energy efficiency improvement. The slide has listed a number of objectives, but what I would like to discuss in particular is really one objective in detail. This objective is social proof. The concept of social proof is widely discussed in psychology. Robert Cialdini coined the term to represent a phenomenon wherein people copy the actions of others in an attempt to undertake behavior in a given situation. A classic example can be seen in household energy use. In an attempt to reduce consumption, one will provide not only the individual's electricity consumption, but also that consumed by their neighbors. This will motivate people to attempt to match the best demonstrated behavior. After all, if my neighbor can do it, why can't I? This same principle is applicable in a large organization. Here in ExxonMobil, we have 17 refineries and a large number of chemical facilities. Providing a common platform for sharing data will promote a competitive environment and motivate the sharing of ideas, best practices, allowing our manufacturing sites to make energy efficiency improvements. Now, let's talk a little bit about really how does the development of this tool work? What is the work process that we needed, and what are some of the fundamental steps that must be done in ensuring that we develop a fleet monitoring tool that meets the needs of our business partners? The fleet monitoring tool development work process can be broken down in 5 major steps. Throughout these 5 steps, active technical subject matter engagement is a key success factor. After all, you need a product that when you are done, everyone agrees with its findings, its accuracies, and it can be used as a tool to compare from site to site, business to business, unit to unit. And that is really the intent of having people engaged at the right levels. Step 1 is to really develop the functional specs. These specs need to define several parameters, including key performance indicators. These key parameters, as well as their associated targets, require consistent estimation methodologies. What data do we collect? How do we calculate our key parameters? How do we filter and identify bad data? How do we set our targets? All these require a uniform and consistent methodology to allow for good comparisons to be made. After all, you and your neighbor, if you were doing comparisons, right, you want to be using the same yardstick. The most challenging part of the entire process is really the data collection. Instrument tags, design information, equipment classification, operational history, etc. needs to be collected. At times, such information can have limited availability. What this initiative helps to do, right, is that it motivates business partners to install the required instruments needed, because without it, they cannot tell how good they are. If they are good, they can't tell. If they are bad, they can't tell, and they will not be able to take the actions to correct their performances. In few cases, we have developed alternate workarounds to estimate missing information, but more often than not, sites or business partners now have and the motivation to install instruments where they are required. Once this data is collected, the next issue arises, With enterprise-wide fleet management, millions of data points are collected. So you now have big data. You now have a lot of data being collected, and now there is now millions of data points. How do we translate all these data into actionable information? Data visualization. These techniques are done, right, to enable us to develop a visual story based on plant data to support improvement opportunities. The next step in the process is really validation. The validation step is intended to establish trust between us, our business partner, and users in the tool results. This is important because the tool results are where business decisions are being made. So this validation step helps to establish that this data has been verified and when acted upon captures the business value that it was intended to have. The final step really is the operationalize step. This involves establishing new work processes or embedding the use of the tool into existing work processes. This enables two key things. The tool sustainment is now part of the work process. So the tool is continuously being improved on, the accuracy is being checked on, any broken tags are fixed, and so on and so forth. The second thing that this enables is that we are able to put into a work process any of our identified opportunities and have these opportunities captured and implemented and acted upon. This next slide really highlights what we want to achieve along the journey to performance excellence. In the top left-hand corner, right, you would see typically a typical KPI or a typical key performance indicator that is not being optimized. You see there's a large variability, and as a result, the mean value of the parameter is very far away from the optimized value. The first step that we have in the process is always to minimize this variation. This is done by pushing the parameter closer to our constraint, and this optimization method pushes the plant in achieving operational excellence. This economic penalty in our GEMS or in our global energy management system is defined as a gap 1 as a gap 1A, in which the large variance is considered to be this optimum, and what we want to do is to be operating at the optimum point. This typically comes in prompts to the console, prompts in the data in which we use to drive steps that can be done to reduce this variability. Gap 1 below down here, as we move towards gap 1, it's really moving towards a historical best demonstrated. Gap 1 is really the economic penalty that exists due to the difference between the current operating conditions and the best demonstrated values. These are examples of this could be exchanger fouling, heater fouling, things that have prevented us from achieving energy efficiencies that we want to achieve. Such differences can typically be closed via engineering and maintenance excellence. Gap 2 below, in which what we want to achieve overall as we go on our journey towards performance excellence, is really the gap between the best demonstrator that we have at our plants as well as the best available technology. However, this gap often involves capital investment, but what this does is to really help us monetize the value of that gap and be able to understand what type of investment can we afford to capture these gap closures. As we operationalize the fleet, it is important that we capture a few key steps. One such step is simple data visualization. This is very important. This is really because the data that is presented is often not directly interpretable as a loss that the businesses are able to act upon. what we have done is really using data visualization to present the data in a few formats or in a few dashboards. On the left side really shows a list of equipment that's sorted in descending order with respect to the overall performance gap. This allows people who are looking at the information to quickly identify which equipment should I be placing my focus on. The middle bar chart that we have really helps to identify the dominant cause of the losses or the gaps that are being identified. What is causing this loss? And this allows us to really bring into focus the type of help or the type of actions that need to be done to help to close this gap. Typically, the information available on the left and the information in the middle, right, is more than adequate to form a cross-functional team that helps to develop the gap closure plans and kickstart a corporate-wide continuous improvement journey. So how do we manage the huge number of equipment included in the fleet? For example, we have more than 700 furnaces within our refining and chemical complexes. To manage this scale and the magnitude demanded of the tool, we adopt really a phase-wise development approach. What we do is really we identify which are the largest equipment and where we want to focus our attention on. The larger the equipment, the more the loss, and thus the higher the priority. To help prioritize this data collection, what we have done is that for the entire heater fleet, it is sorted in descending order of energy consumption. A threshold fire heater duty value was then set to really identify the higher priority items to be included in the tool. The rest of the equipment will be included later depending on resource availability. This same approach is taken across all our various other fleets as we look through the fleets and as we identify equipment. We really use this methodology to really identify which are the high priority equipment that we want to have it monitored within our fleet management systems. For example, what this shows here are some of the process data that you have to collect if you want to successfully monitor a fire heater. Just for one of our fleets, in this case, a fire heater energy fleet, 20 to 30 data points are required. For example, the furnace tool needs to collect the stack oxygen level, the temperatures, the draft, the duty, the efficiency, the air preheater service factors, and so on. Defining these parameters needed for monitoring is extremely important before the data collection activity started. It's really because as you go about collecting this information, you need to have this properly defined, because if additional information needs to be added after this data collection activity has taken place, there will be a lot of rework and recycle required. The other things that we typically go through after we have collected the data, this process information is then collected through the data historian system and is really uploaded on a routine basis into Tableau or into our data systems. A validation exercise is then carried out with all our business partners as well as the subject matter experts, just to ensure that the loss opportunities being highlighted and the gaps being highlighted are consistent and are actionable and can be captured by the business team. This next slide really covers some of the benchmarks and target definition that we have set. Typically, the target definition is set gap one really based on historical performance. And right now, what we have is really defining it based on a 10th or 90th percentile of daily data, corrected or normalized based on operating conditions. And that is what we have defined as a gap one performance, in which gap one performance defined in our system is really a historical best performance. Gap 2 benchmark is typically set by the best available technology. For example, stack temperatures of 300 to 350 degrees F using heat pipe air preheaters or glass-coated air preheaters, or 1.5 to 2% excess O2s that can be achieved with balanced draft heaters and with the proper heater burner maintenance programs. To date, we have more than 200 heaters sitting in the tool, with various other equipment also in the energy management systems, and more than 50 million data points, daily data points have been collected over the past 9 years. This really highlights the incredible amount of data that needs to be managed, and as well highlights the importance of having proper data visualization techniques to help tell a story and to help our business partners visualize the actionable steps and proper recommendations that can be taken to improve business performance. Various dashboards are created to help visualize that data from different perspectives. There is overall fleet, global regional KPIs, site equipment and dashboards for support engineers and subject matter experts. So depending on the users and depending on how the users plan to use the data, comparisons can be made across different regions, different sites, different equipments, different businesses, different business teams, and even across different types of fleets. So these dashboards are tailored to meet the requirements of a broad segment of users. This dashboard helps to address the social proof principle. Anyone that wants to use the dashboard can go in, see how themselves are doing, see how their peers are doing, and really find out if my peers are doing much better than myself. I'll be able to reach out to my peers to understand how were they able to achieve that level of energy efficiency, and that helps to facilitate dialogue for transfer of knowledge, best practices, maintenance practices, optimization practices that can take place across our worldwide network. Areas of improvement can be easily identified using the tool. For each furnace, one can identify the dominant contributor of the identified gaps. Is it because the excess O2 is high, or is it because the stack temperatures are high? If the excess O2 is high, what's the associated loss of the excess O2? What are the sites that have low excess O2 and what are the sites that have no losses associated with excess O2? Are we able to reach out to those sites, find out what they have done, and really be able to implement those steps at my sites? For example, for the first furnace that we have shown on the graph, the dominant cause is really the high stack temperature, and that's evident by the large blue bar. And the second one is the malfunctioning of the air preheater, really highlighted by the gap one caused by the air preheater out of service. So by being able to identify or to quickly narrow down the dominant cause, we'll be able to set up the right subject matter experts to quickly help the sites with identifying and closing the associated gaps. Now, let's talk about what we have achieved with the tool since the tool is operationalized in 2018. This first example shown is really an example of when the excess air or the excess O2 has been high. And what the tool has been used to do was to offer technical solutions for gap closures. Let me explain the chart on the top right. The green line that you see is really the best demonstrated excess O2 as a function of firing duty. There's a threshold duty above which stack excess O2 is constant and below which it increases. This is inherently due to the nature of the furnace performance. And beyond a certain point, there is difficulty keeping the excess O2 low. So as we derate, the burner's performance goes down as a function of the design, and excess O2 goes up. But what this tool helps to identify is really what should those excess O2 targets be? And what is that achievable point that I have managed to get to achieve in the past? So that what it helps it to do is that it triggers really a root cause investigation to help to minimize those gaps. Tighter control on stack O2 temperature through improved maintenance practices is achievable. So what they have found in this case, the site managed to adopt and deploy good maintenance practices around damper maintenance, because it was found that more often than not, the dampers could not be adjusted as the dampers were not working properly. So with improved damper maintenance, they were able to reduce some of the excess O2. Other examples of where this has been done is that when we have looked at some of the excess O2 and we're not able to hit the targets, other examples that we have seen is really improved furnace sealing examples from a better performing site, and really adopting these practices that the other sites are seeing and really having that being repeated at all our manufacturing sites. Now, this second example really highlights a trend in which stack temperatures over a longer time horizon has led to improved decisions on cleaning decisions. I think this is just one example of the trends that we have shown, but what it has also shown is really how that stack temperature, when it has been monetized over a period of time, allows us to quickly identify economic solutions for cleaning. In this case, what we have done, because the loss has been monetized, we are able to quickly make decisions on cleaning practices and identify new cleaning technologies. In this, you can see that after introducing online cleaning technologies, we can see the drop in the stack temperature, as well as the drop in the associated loss and how we've been able to justify these online cleaning methods. So some of these gap closure solutions that we have implemented from this identification is really things such as online cleaning, chemical cleanings, offline cleaning, sandblasting, hydroblasting, etc. Structural improvements and project justification. Sometimes the tool can be used to look really at long-term trends. So what are some of the users that we have identified from long-term trends? These long-term trends provided by the tool can help in justify the use of new technology to help close gap 2. So in this example that is showing, that there is a significant gap in terms of the air efficiency. And what we have done is really help to monetize that delta in that air efficiency. So with that monetization of the air efficiency delta, we are able to quickly develop a business case to identify the use of state-of-the-art heat pipe technology. This state-of-the-art heat pipe technology helps us to reduce our stack temperatures significantly and improve our furnace efficiencies. So from there, you'll be able to identify opportunities where new air preheaters can be added, or air preheaters need to be repaired, or even air preheaters that have degraded and need to be repaired. ExxonMobil wide, this tool has enabled us to identify an additional 10 to 15% of improvement opportunities for furnaces that are now included in our site operations and capital improvement plans. And with that, I really come to the end of the presentation, and we'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, King Seng. People online, including students, go ahead and submit questions in the Q&A or raise your hand in the Zoom feature and I can call on you. I'll start with one question here for most of us who are not in the oil and gas or in refining or petrochemical industry. You kind of mentioning in some sense lower efficiency of a process as related to higher stack temperature. So one, can you explain to us what the stack temperature means to you? And a lot of times we think about hotter processes becoming more efficient, like a power plant. The hotter it can get, the more efficient it can be at generating power. So this sounds like the opposite kind of a process. So I was wondering if you can give some insight into that, what you're discussing.
Yeah, let me just go back to one of the earlier slides, I guess, which has a picture that maybe it's easier for me to explain that. So let me just go back to slide. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so this slide, what you will see here on the right hand side, right, is really a picture of a typical furnace. As you can see, as the fuel is injected into the furnace, the fuel burns, form hot, and as a result, you have radiative heat transfer taking place, convective heat transfer taking place, and that heat is being transferred to the process fluid. From here, when it rises up the stack flue gas really goes into the air preheaters, and some of the heat is used and recovered back into the air that is being preheated, and the stack that eventually goes out is really the energy that is lost to the environment. So with higher stack temperatures, it just means that when I'm burning that amount of fuel, I am losing that heat in my stack, in my flue gases that are being released to the environment. So essentially, for higher stack temperatures in this case, it results in lower utilization of the fuel, as I'm putting that heat somewhere into the environment rather than using it in my processes.
Right. Okay. So I think I can understand that now when you point to this diagram. You're heating. You're trying to transfer the heat to your working fluid, which is in a pipe, and the stack temperature, the higher it is, essentially means the heat did not get transferred to your process properly.
Yes,
so,
that's correct. Yeah, that's
okay.
exactly it. Yeah.
All right. I can get that. We do have another question here from the attendees online. It's maybe kind of a general question of what what should be an overall takeaway from your presentation. You're talking about a lot of process engineering here and getting into data. And in the beginning, you were sort of highlighting, I guess, overall goals for a company like ExxonMobil and their refining processes in terms of optimizing energy and looking to maximize profit as opposed to energy efficiency. So ultimately, you're trying to translate this, I guess, into money and whether it's helping the company, but you have a huge fleet. So I guess, what are the challenges of taking individual processes and trying to translate this to some sort of ultimate larger bottom line? That's one potential takeaway, but is there some other takeaway that we can take from how to think about individual engineering processes and the efficiency here and how it translates to the larger business, a large company like Exxon? That's maybe difficult.
I think what you're asking is, when the whole point of this presentation and where we are today is that we own, let's see, most everybody will know, they know Baytown, they know Beaumont, they know Baton Rouge. Okay, those are three large refineries of ExxonMobil's, right? You would think for a large company like ExxonMobil that those three sites, they're within 4 hours of each other by driving, that they would talk on a regular basis. Well, that just isn't real. It's kind of like UT and A&M really don't talk. So similar thing. All right. So we always were presenting data to allow them to look and compare to each other, but it wasn't as real time to allow them to change something faster to capture the value. This, I think you hit on it in the sense of, yes, we look at overall profitability. Energy is part of profitability. It is considered an operating expense. So we want to reduce our operating expense because that helps us make more money. But that means that we're spending less, we're using the energy that we do have to burn or create the gasoline in your cars and et cetera. We're using it more efficiently. So the key for us is this is enabling Beaumont, Baton Rouge, and Baytown to look at it every couple of weeks. We usually update this on a monthly basis right now. We're trying to move to a more daily update. But then they can look at it and say, where are our opportunities at a glance? And then they can also learn from each other more quickly than they might have in the past. And then we can minimize our operating expenses to boot. You don't want to get to the end of the year and realize, well, I had a budget of $1 million and I just spent 2 million. You want to be able to optimize as you go to make sure we meet our budgets.
Right. Okay.
Right. So as what Bill is pointing out, right, what this fleet management system really brings about on its scale is really, in addition to the scale and putting the data all together, it's really the transparency that it brings along, because it ensures that every site makes, or every unit, we are comparing it on an apples to apples basis, right? And that brings really about that credibility when we choose where to prioritize the resourcing and where are the larger needs and where the true opportunities are, and doing it on, I would say, more on a company-wide basis and less on a silo basis.
Right. Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's good. Thank you for those answers.
Well, Gary, I'll just add on when he talks about fleet management. I know this might have been a little bit confusing. Fleet in general, we talk in terms of equipment fleet. He mentioned we have over 700 furnaces to do the work that is done to create ethylene, to create plastic, to do whatever is necessary. They're not all on the same data systems. They're spread all over the world. So trying to bring that all together to see them side by side was a monumental task to get just the furnaces. This includes, we've also done boilers. We've also done cogeneration units, similar to a power plant. We also have done steam crackers separately, which steam crackers are basically where we create, that's where the ethylene and propylene material gets created. That's the building block for your plastic bottles. And keep saying, what am I missing?
Steam systems.
Heat exchangers. Heat exchangers.
Heat exchangers, yeah.
Yeah, heat exchangers. There's over 40,000 heat exchangers. And we are just going down the task now of trying to develop that tool further and further to capture as much as we can in there.
Right. I think that's good. Yeah, that helps. That makes a lot of sense. So in the sense that you have hundreds of furnaces and tens of thousands of heat exchangers, and maybe people review this once a year across the company, but now you're making it so that people can see where each individual facility and unit is on a monthly basis, and maybe faster than that going forward, so that they can track it. So yeah, that does seem like quite a challenge. So I see how that can be useful. Here is another question from the Q&A. What are some of the methods used to collect data to assess equipment performance? For example, how do you collect data about excess O2, oxygen, and how do you compute the optimal performance of furnaces? And that this target curve you showed. So are there differences in the way you can collect data, and how does this affect different kinds of sensors? I guess maybe the question is.
Well, let me so I'll let Keen Seng answer it as well. But the data, the instrumentation, which hopefully some of these students have had instrumentation class, and if they haven't, understand, it's O2 is done by an analyzer. So we basically pull the flue gas material that's in the stack there off into an analyzer to measure oxygen, and that's basically how we do it. And then we have temperature sensors, thermal wells in the furnace to measure our temperatures. Most of this data that we collect is usually through Honeywell systems, which a lot of people are familiar with Honeywell. And then they go into a plant historian database. It's not a cloud server. Most people are obviously very familiar with Apple and Google and Microsoft and et cetera. Our data is through the Honeywell systems, and then we pull it into other areas so that we can collect it into one massive database. Usually right now, it happens to be through Excel. In the future, we're trying to pull it into a cloud-based server system. That's what we're going to be doing in the future. Anything to add to that, Keen Seng?
Yeah, I would say that the data that's collected is really via different sensors and different instruments, right? And what it helps to drive is really that if that particular sensor instrument is needed to calculate the performance, right, it is a sensor and instrument that is needed for process monitoring. I mean, because it's hard to benchmark where you are if you do not know where you are, right? And I think that's where having this fleet or this tool and that consensus on how to do that monitoring helps to drive the case for action for installing some of these instruments.
You can collect this data manually.
Yeah.
It's just so
Costly.
inefficient that you don't want. I mean, I know people that have gone out with a temperature gun, right? People go out with a temperature gun to shoot a piece of pipe or shoot a stack or shoot the gas come out. It just is so inefficient and time consuming. It's not going to happen.
Right. Here's a question. It's kind of broad, maybe tough to answer. This is kind of talking about monetary savings and how you calculate this without kind of giving away the secrets of ExxonMobil. Is there any feel you can give us for, how saving or, cost savings have changed with regard to energy optimization type things at refineries? It could be, I don't know, over the history of the refining industry, depending on what you know from your experience and how you might view digitalization being necessary to go forward. Like maybe you got as far as you could go without using more of this digital data, and this is helping you go the extra
So
bit
I think
savings.
I think let me try and answer. So part of the question was previously too was how do we calculate it, the lost opportunity? It's really not that complicated. It's more about you've got a standard O2 and we'll just pick 2%. If we want to achieve 2% excess O2 in every single furnace, well, they're measuring 5%. It's not hard to do a duty balance to figure out, well, I've got 5% that I'm using, that I'm not using. There's 3% delta there. That 3% is leading to this much loss of fuel gas that I'm burning. So we translate it back into a duty. And then, of course, in our case, it's natural gas pricing. So it's pretty straightforward. We just calculate back everything that we have done with this tool is calculated back to some form of duty loss that is being thrown to the environment. And we put a natural gas price to it so that we know what the lost opportunity is.
Yeah.
Now, from a broader standpoint, it is kind of interesting over history. We here in the United States, just on a philosophical standpoint, we here really are experiencing some extremely low natural gas prices, which is fantastic for your electrical bill. While Keen Seng, coming from Singapore, which you saw at the beginning, his price of his electricity his natural gas is almost 4 times ours. So his electricity price as a result is a lot higher than ours. So it's rather interesting that, I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. I wouldn't have said that 20 years ago. So we still keep finding the natural gas and oil reserves to keep our prices relatively simple, straightforward, low. I couldn't think of a good word there.
Right. There's a couple more questions coming in. This one's kind of a good one. It's just talking about the challenges of handling big data, if you will. You talked about using Excel right now. There's a colleague here that held a class that he wanted to call too big to Excel when you have to analyze.
That is what we are finding as we start to extend it to the larger equipment fleets, right?
So the question is, one of your slides had something, talking about 50 million data points. And what have you learned, or there's some insights from dealing with a bunch of data? How do you find mistakes in the data, or how do you make them uniform for some reason if they aren't coming in the same units otherwise? Or, what kind of ways do you find problems in the data? I'm mostly looking at energy statistical data, and then there's people submitting forms to the government, and find errors in there. But how do you deal with this?
And I think that all those errors that you mentioned, right? Those are errors that we have come across. I mean, errors in unit conversion, errors in whether when you're using the fuel is in higher heating value or lower heating value, errors in terms of the measurement points or the tags that are incorrect. And what we really do is that we have really done is to really standardize the information that we want, right? And really implement really a screening process that goes through that data and is able to tell us whether that data is fit for purpose or not. And at the same time, in the longer term, right, as we move towards, I would say, automation in data lake, right? What that helps us to do is that if there is any calculation changes that we want to make, if there's any new formulas that we want to implement, there's any new filters or data checks that we need to do, it's going to be a lot easier to do it than to do it in Excel. I think those are the advantages as we push towards platforms that are more suited for big data.
Right. Here's kind of a, I guess in some sense, a big question, big picture question, but a lot of it comes down to, I think, people like yourselves making changes in facilities and learning how to make these changes. But it's just a question about ExxonMobil and efforts that could be geared towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What kind of things is Exxon maybe thinking about at refineries? I guess I could think of some things like you're talking about natural gas price, running tests to do heating with hydrogen, if you were to create hydrogen from other means besides natural gas or sequestering it otherwise. Is there anything you can say about that, about challenges you might think about at the refinery or things that are being tested, again, without giving away secret sauces?
I would just say that we as a corporation are looking into different areas of one of the things that people talk about is carbon capture. And it's not applicable everywhere. In some places it's really applicable, and others it's not. So that's one thing. We have researchers always looking to say, how do we turn carbon dioxide into liquid fuel? We look at algae gasoline. That's another aspect. Biodiesel. How do we include that? We have a division looking at plastic recycle. We're doing all kinds of research and doing a bunch of analysis. It's a more for a plant that's been running for almost 100 years. It's just a very complicated issue to how do you take something of that's been running for that long. I mean, some of our units are 70 years old, and how do you modernize it to do some of the climate change initiatives that are out there? So we're always studying it. We're always working on it. I think time will tell how we respond to the whole aspect of it. We do. Yeah. I will say on this particular fleet alone, it's not shown here, but we do have some guys that I'm sure most of the students on the line have seen these things about if I reduce this much greenhouse gas, it's the same as planting 1 million trees or something like that. So I actually have had a couple of guys who independently will take some of the numbers and they'll play around, and they'll talk to the engineers that are doing the work in the field and say, hey, here's just another way of looking at it besides just lost opportunity value. Anything to add, King Seng?
No, I think you covered most of it, right? I think ExxonMobil is really looking at I guess just a myriad of solutions and really that research and that engineering is going to take time to come up with what really makes sense in the longer run for all our facilities.
And I think, and I will just add on to that to say, we're realizing that not one solution fits all.
Yeah.
What's something that might fit Singapore will not necessarily fit Rotterdam or Antwerp overseas in Belgium and Netherlands. It's interesting that we're starting to discover that more and more all the time.
That maybe goes into one of these other questions on from the attendees. The question is, what kind of inefficiencies or improvements, however you want to view it, have you found since kind of moving to this digital information and analysis of the fleet, and were they things that you expected, or was there a lot of things or opportunities that came up that you didn't expect? And perhaps on your last comment, given that sort of the laws of physics and engineering are sort of the same everywhere, what is something that was different somewhere that means you can't use the same solution?
I think we've generally found that, in some cases, we just transparency does a lot. But we did discover that the areas, like in particular for not as much for furnaces. Furnaces are pretty well known where the issues are, or the opportunities. I would say boilers was a little bit different, because boilers in general are very, very efficient. They're more efficient than most furnaces, because it's boiling water, basically making steam. So I would think it was a little bit surprising on areas where we found some opportunities there that people were just surprised by, and that the magnitude, it's like a 1% change really was, I think, Carrie, as you pointed out, we found that, okay, well, it's a lot more loss in Singapore or Europe than it was necessarily in North America, just because of the pricing. And when you put them side by side, you realize we probably should pay a little more attention to that particular boiler that's sitting over in England than we do. So I think it highlighted more of that. I do think it also is highlighting on the bigger equipment. You won't find we know more about the bigger equipment, and it's just bringing the transparency and bringing the comparison. Where I think we're finding the bigger opportunities are the smaller pieces of equipment. Heat exchangers, like I said, there's 40,000 of them. And you can't necessarily compare one service with another from site to site, much less within a site, within a plant. So understanding how those things are fouling and why they're fouling, and what benefit that you get by cleaning those exchangers, and or how novel ways to clean exchangers. It's bringing up a whole new aspect that not sure that everybody appreciated at a higher level. If you're the engineer on the unit, you probably appreciated it, but maybe not the person above you or above that person. So I think it's bringing those opportunities more and more to light.
Yeah, and it's really, I would say, the other area where it has really helped to bring to light is where the opportunity sits across interfaces, right? If you were doing something here and it was impacting someone else, you were not going to do anything about that. And what the fleet management system helps to highlight is really on a holistic basis, right? What were the losses like? And really having the individual business partners work together to close some of these gaps.
And just what Keen's saying is really, Baytown has both a refinery and a chemical plant, and those are run by two different companies within ExxonMobil, but they're also different engineering staffs. So this helps highlight, we have this shared resource that we need to go look at more closely. Or we know this boiler that sits in the chemical facility is impacting something in the refinery. This has brought it to a level where before they might not have been able to see the impact as easily.
Right, makes sense, I guess. Yeah, if some places exposed to the higher feedstock or natural gas prices, then it could be worth allocating more money there for regular maintenance than some other location. Cheaper prices, even though the equipment may be more efficient in the cheap price area, you don't want to focus on that anymore, or the improvements there. Focus on the other one. Let's see, there's a couple more questions here to maybe finish up. So yeah, here I guess here's the sort of the buzzwords in data science, if you will. Machine learning, neural networks, artificial intelligence. You get enough numbers, then you need something else to crank through them. So Are you looking into these, and if so, what kind of areas do you think they're mostly applicable to? Short-term decision kind of running the plant, or longer-term planning and supply chain management. What can you say there?
I think the whole intent of us shifting away from Excel to other interface, right, is to eventually enable some of this big data or some of this more advanced data analytics, right? So what we do plan to study, I would say, in the future will be things such as machine learning and really like digital twins. I would say that we should be able to have some of that target setting, or some of that artificial intelligence is intelligent enough to find historical data that proves that you have done where you have performed better than today, and what are some of the conditions that help to enable that. And I think that's really what we feel that's going to happen in the future, and that's why there is a push to push all this data away from the plant historians, right, and really into really like a system in which all this information can be accommodated in.
Right. Maybe we'll finish up with kind of this last couple of questions, which are a little bit around, let's just say, you have a lot of internal drivers and to make improvements, mostly focused on improving profits and minimizing costs. We're sort of in this world of climate change and other kinds of environmental regulations that might, regulations might come out, or to affect changes in facilities like you're running. How do you, how fast can you change facilities? Let's say you got a greenhouse gas reduction target, or some mandated use of using hydrogen or something like this. You mentioned facilities that are 70 years old and are pieces of equipment that may be 70 years old. So you don't change these quickly a lot. What can you say about if you were sort of pressured to change things quicker? What is there kind of regulations or policies that would help change things more quickly at refineries? What are kind of the challenges of changing the way that refineries operate? Maybe feedstocks are, say to hydrogen or something like this for heating, other purposes. Who knows? Carbon capture, for example. What are some of the challenges you can imagine? These kind of lowering climate or CO2 emissions, just space, engineering know-how, just state-of-the-art technology and knowledge in general. I mean, there's a lot of challenges here.
It's a big challenge. There is going to be some state-of-the-art technology involved here, stuff that we haven't even dreamed up yet, that a lot of the guys that are probably on the phone right now are going to help dream up. And it's the size of the plant does have something to do with it. It's usually greater than 5 years. So if some legislation was passed today in North America, let's just say in the state of Texas, somebody said, we're going to do this and we're going to do it by, 2025. There's almost, it would be Herculean for us to get there, depending on what was being asked. Probably because, and it's not only because it takes time to develop the engineering, but it also takes time to just get the equipment. Hardly anything can be done of any scale in less than a year. So it's a matter of trying to get the whole system put together. It's easily more than 5 years away. As an example, I'll give you Rotterdam overseas. They have a target to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by, it's a double. I'm not going to remember the number, but it's greater than 10%. I know it's greater than 10% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We're already in discussions today trying to understand, well, what's the impact to, we have a refinery We have an aromatics chemical plant and an oxy, it's another chemical, an oxy plant that are all there together. And what does that mean for how they're going to have to reconfigure or look in 2030 and beyond to comply with that? Along with one of the things we have to consider constantly is what are the changes in regulations going to be on the products that we create? You know, everybody today takes it for advantage that we drive cars with gasoline and diesel with minimal sulfur, you know, their ppm levels of sulfur specifications. Well, that used to not be the case. I mean, they were used to be, and think about jet planes today. Jet planes today don't have the same specification as diesel in your truck or gasoline in your car. There's a belief that that's going to come. So when that happens, we have to meet that regulation along with any other environmental regulation. So it's years of study and time. I've been involved in these, and less than 5 years is impossible. And then if you talk about let's just say if it was a federal law in the United States, and we have 3-4 rather large refineries and one very small one in Montana, and trying to get all those up to the same level at the same time is not easy.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for the questions. Bill Hicks and King Seng of ExxonMobil. I learned about running chemical plants a little bit today. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody for joining in. Next week's talk will be a conversation with myself and Ellen Steckel of Arizona State University, who's in charge of their Lightworks program, director of that, which is focused on some of these challenges that Bill just mentioned. What does it really take to go low carbon in some of these hard to decarbonize sectors and products? So we will have discussion on that challenge from technical and scientific engineering and policy type perspectives. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.